Welcome, everyone. Thank you for watching. According to Syrian TV, Turkey has begun an attack into northeastern Syria. But while President Trump did clear U.S. troops out of the region, the Pentagon has denied that Turkey has begun any attacks, and Turkish media also denies that the Turkish military has launched any strikes. Now, clearly the region is on an even sharper edge than usual, and here in the U.S., the president's decision to withdraw from the region has prompted strong bipartisan outrage. For more on this, let's bring in our senior Washington correspondent, Dan Raviv. All right, so Dan, give us a few examples of criticism from both parties, because it's a very rare day on the Hill when both the Democrats and Republicans criticize the president.
But no surprise when it comes from the Democrats. The top Democrat in the House, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, she put out a statement that says the president's decision to withdraw U.S. forces is a deeply disturbing development that betrays our Kurdish allies who have been instrumental partners in our mission to eradicate ISIS. Later, this reckless, misguided decision undermines the efforts by our brave service members and our allies to end ISIS's tyranny. And now the criticism that President Trump is not so likely to ignore from a Republican, the senior Senator Lindsey Graham, usually a supporter of what President Trump does. Graham wrote this on Twitter: "Any incursion into northern Syria by Turkey creates a nightmare for the region and U.S. national security interests. It will be met with most severe sanctions against Turkey's military and economy by Congress." In fact, Republican Graham announced that he's working with a Democrat, Chris Van Hollen, on a Senate bill or resolution that would impose tough sanctions on Turkey and call for suspending that country from the NATO alliance if Turkey's army does roll into Syria. Now, I think, Michelle, you've seen President Trump's version of that threat. The president wrote that he will, quote, totally destroy and obliterate the economy of Turkey if that country does anything he considers to be off limits. Mr. Trump pointed out that he did that last year when he imposed financial penalties on Turkey until that country released an American Christian pastor who'd been imprisoned. Michelle?
Right. Dan, there are about 1,000 U.S. troops in Syria at the moment. So what is the latest on how many troops are going to be pulled out of the country? And has that process begun already?
No official announcement, but just imagine this scene at the State Department in the press room. Reporters were there and got an off-the-record briefing from a senior official who looked at them and said, you know, there are fewer troops being moved out than the number of people in this room. So someone took a count and said, oh, that means fewer than 26. We don't know if that's literally true. This official said it just from 2 outposts in northeastern Syria to get them out of the way of a Turkish invasion. The official also pointed out to something that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said early this year: the importance of ensuring that the Turks don't slaughter the Kurds. Now, President Trump, he gave a number of around 50 U.S. troops. He wanted to bring them home because they could be in danger because of where they are with Turkey's expected move. And the president also mentioned, we talk about Turks and Kurds, he said he doesn't think Americans should be caught in the middle when there are regional disputes that have been going on, he said, for hundreds of years.
All right, so Dan, just to be clear, the Trump administration has not confirmed a complete troop withdrawal, correct?
But the president is the source on so much information in this town, and he mentioned around 50. Michelle?
All right, Dan, thank you so much, Dan Raviv. All right, let's discuss with Matthew Brodsky. He's a senior fellow with the Gold Institute for International Strategy, and Eric Mandel is the director of the Middle East Political Information Network. Thank you both for being with us. Matt, as we just heard from Dan, some of the president's top supporters are pushing against this move. Senator Lindsey Graham calling it a disaster in the making. Is this move a disaster, Matt?
Absolutely. This will rate as a Biden, Obama-like get out of Iraq type of move that will help reconstitute ISIS. This will get Turkey to be in control of about a 60,000 population refugee camp, about 9,000 of which are former ISIS fighters. This area also would open up the northern route of the land bridge that Iran has been hoping to open up, which again now would put Israel having to make really tough decisions if it's going to attack weapons that are going through there, and it happens to be a place that's run by Turkey. It's not obviously how you would want to repay your allies. 11,000 Kurds have fought and died, and the list goes on and on. But essentially, with a very small force that we've had there, we've been able to achieve a lot. And instead of portraying this as a very smart victory on President Trump's part, he is instead portraying it otherwise.
Eric, to Matt's point, at the very least, this is a huge betrayal of the Kurds, the U.S. allies in the war against ISIS. What are the consequences of this decision by the president?
So this is dangerous for American national security interests on so many levels. First of all, not only is he handing the Kurds on a silver platter to the Turks, he is rewarding a dictator who's in bed with the Russians and the Iranians, who will also, and this is not conjecture, will probably ethnically cleanse the Kurds from East Syria and have a population transfer. We only have to look at what the Turks did in Afrin in northwest Syria. And if the president says our only interest there was getting rid of ISIS, well, I was in northern Iraq recently and I saw ISIS fighters. ISIS is reconstituting. And so if we have the Kurds now fighting against the Turks, then what's going to happen is they're going to take their eye off of ISIS in northwest Syria, and they're also going to grow in Iraq.
Eric, some of the president's supporters are saying that, no, he is not throwing the Kurds under the bus because he has threatened economic sanctions if Turkey does anything that he considers off limits, and that Turkey will be taking that threat into consideration with regards to the Kurds. What would you say to that?
I think the our allies around the world heard a message loud and clear that America may not keep its word. I think this was terrible, and I think one of the most important allies in the region is Israel. Israel really has to think, if President Trump is reelected, will he be with them as much 4 years from now as he is today?
So it begs the question, Matt, why did the president make this move? I mean, granted, he wants to fulfill some campaign promises, including to bring U.S. troops back home, but is that enough of a justification to make such a move that is drawing such strong condemnation from both sides of the aisle? Why do you think he did this, and why do you think he did this now?
I think it's a little bit of sleight of hand. See, he promised to bring troops home, sure, but let's be clear. This wasn't 100,000 or so troops, as in 2003, going into Iraq. We're talking about some 1,200, 1,000 in the northeast, 2,000 in Tanaf in the south. Now, he wanted to bring home troops. Now, he was really referring to Afghanistan. You have 14,000 troops there. He did not bring those troops home. Again, what the U.S. is doing here just requires, frankly, a couple soldiers. This is why you're hearing from the Defense Department that such a small number were moved out of that area. It requires one troop with one flag, and that deters a lot of really bad behavior. And President Trump is trying to convince his base that he's kept his promise, and instead he could sacrifice the heart of the Middle East. And again, so much has been accomplished, really, with the very little we were allowed to work with.
Eric, very quickly in the 20 seconds we have left, how do you see Turkey responding to this now? What do you think they're going to do?
I think they're going to delay, and then when America takes its attention away from this issue, they are eventually going to go in and have that long safe zone, and the Kurds are going to pay a price, and our allies are going to pay a price, and America will be weakened in the world's eyes.
Well, let's see if this pushback from Congress may actually result in the president potentially changing his mind. It's something he has done in the past. All right. Thank you so much, Eric, Mandel, Matt Brodsky. Good to have you both with us. Still ahead on the show, protest.